Do we know what Cal's full first name is, Paulie?
None of us in this room knew it for sure. I haven't looked yet. Everyone want to guess?
So it's not just Calvin, because he's a junior, so his dad.
Your guess is Calvin?
Calvin Nuke Lelouch Ripken III, Jr.
Calvin Edwin Ripken Jr.
Yeah, Calvin. Let's bring in Calvin Ripken Jr. Who calls you Calvin? Anybody?
Everybody I went to high school with called me Calvin.
Did your mom ever do that when you got in trouble?
For sure. That was the tone of voice, Calvin.
Let me give you
for sure.
the full introduction here. Cal is on the call of TBS's exclusive AL postseason coverage. It'll be Toronto and Cleveland tomorrow night at 7 Eastern with Ernie Johnson, Ron Darling, and Sam Ryan. You guys called the AL wildcard game and the Boston-Cleveland matchup. Let me start with Cleveland. Trying to sum up what Cleveland is to a national audience, how would you sum that up in a sentence or two?
I don't think you can do it in a sentence or two. They had the most powerful starting rotation, best pitching in the league for most of the year. They lost it towards the end of the year, so you could start to describe them that good power, young pitching, can win with an experienced manager like Terry Francona. But after they lost two of their big arms down the stretch, I think we all sort of wrote them off. And so here's a team that still thinks they're really good without two of their major weapons and a manager that almost seems like he's playing with house money. He says, if I get a lead, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And he's done exactly that. So how many sentences was that?
You're okay. You're okay.
It's a hard story to explain. They're under the radar, but they're a very good quality team. Very impressive. Offensively, they don't get the credit, but they scored the second most runs in the American League, and Boston got all the credit. And then they got the big hits in that series, and they made the big plays. So they just outplayed them, and it seemed like Boston was getting going there towards the end, but they just ran out of time.
What happened to the great starting pitching in the postseason? I'm talking about all of the postseason. Yeah, you got guys who are barely going 5 innings now.
Yeah, it seems like, especially in the early rounds where, a 5-game series can turn on one game. And when you're in that play-in game as a wild card team, it's you're looking for any signs and you're going to try to use your whole team. And so decisions are going to be made much quicker. But trying to explain, why Kershaw hasn't had more success, or David Price, two of the great pitchers during the regular season. In the playoffs, it's just hard to explain. The pressure's on. Usually the scores are lower. One-run games, small ball. A lot of the minor points of execution are important. And so I don't know. It's just things are sped up, and it's a much more urgent. The manager sits over there. He's thinking about calling the bullpen. If any sign happens in the first, second inning, now no matter who's on the mound.
Big Papi, first ballot Hall of Famer?
I believe. I'm trying to think. How do I vote? Do I vote still? No. Big Papi for sure. He's one of the game's greatest players. One of the greatest clutch performers, and I found myself rooting for him in that broadcast position, and you're not really supposed to. But I'm sitting there watching him at a big point in the game, trying to get a hit, and I'm kind of thinking this will be a nice ending to his story. But what a story it's been. He's meant a whole lot more to baseball, I think, than just the numbers, the gigantic numbers he puts up. He's been a personality, and he's been really a wonderful player for Boston. And I got a chance to witness it on that last Sunday, his last game, just to see how everybody felt about him. And then we were there, of course, when they got eliminated the other night. And walking through there, people had tears in their eyes. He had tears in his eyes. What a wonderful send-off.
He's Cal Ripken, part of TBS's AL postseason coverage, along with Ernie Johnson and Ron Darling and Sam Ryan, the reporter. Did you ever face Darling?
Ron Darling, yeah. I don't know if I hit a homer off him once, I think. I might have had decent numbers off. It's not something you go back and say he owned me or I owned him. I like competing against him. Sometimes he would make you mad from the other side because he was such a competitor. But he's been wonderful in the broadcast booth. He knows everything about everything. There's not a subject you can talk about where he doesn't have some sort of recall. He studies really well, and he's really helped me out a lot, guiding and directing me, because he does it, I would say, for a living.
Yeah,
I do it a little bit more as a hobby because I get the playoffs and I get maybe a handful of games during the end of the season. But him and Ernie are wonderful to work with.
the pressure that you'll have with the Dodgers and Nationals. You got a Game 5. You got Scherzer against Hill. Can you describe what that pressure is like when it's the win and advance or lose and go home?
Yeah, we were trying to, in a couple of production meetings, people were asking me, how does it feel playing in elimination games? And they looked me up and they saw that I performed well. And I don't really remember it as elimination games. I remember the desperation of diving into first base when we lost to the Yankees in '96. I made the last out, grounded to shortstop. And I thought that for 1 minute I could dive to first base and change the outcome of the routine play. But it didn't work out that way. But elimination games, I think, if you really start to think about this is a do-or-die game, you start putting yourself in a spiral downwards. So you start thinking about the end results and the ramifications of such. You really need to wipe your mind clean, have confidence that you play this game and it's a similar game, and just go out and allow yourself to perform. And so the pressure is what the pressure of the player puts on. The pressure is real, that it's the adrenaline is pumping, the atmosphere is more exciting. But somehow you got to get past that and find a place inside that says, I've played in a similar situation than this before. I'm just going to go out and be me. And if you can do that, those guys seem to perform pretty well. So pressure is what the guys put on themselves, I think.
We were just talking about first album that we bought or first concert. We were talking about Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan got a Nobel Peace Prize for Literature here this morning. Nobel Prize for Literature. First album you bought, do you remember?
It might have been an 8-track.
All right.
I don't know. I was my influences were more Motown. So I think let me see. It might have been an 8-track, and I think it might have been Earth, Wind, and Fire.
All right. That's not a bad one to start out with. First concert you went to?
I wasn't a concert goer. I might not have went to a concert until I got to the big leagues, either Billy Joel or Hart.
Hart?
Yeah, Terry Kennedy, when he was, we had a game in Kansas City, and he had tickets and said, come along with me. So I went and saw Hart. But I didn't go to a lot of concerts.
That's kind of sad.
If you look back on my life, I was a nomadic baseball kid. My dad managed in the minor leagues for the first 14 years. We had a little bit different lifestyle. We went to where he was in a different small community in the country, and that was our life. So I guess the opportunities to go to those things didn't happen until I was out of the house.
Can you relate to Jim and John Harbaugh, that they grow up with a dad who was a college coach and, not at a major program, but, they followed along. That was what the life was with the coach, with your dad being the same thing.
Yeah, I think I can relate to the importance of teaching and developing and watching. I think all the time, especially as a parent when you're dealing with your kids, Dad had a lot of patience for teaching, and he had systems in which to teach. When to talk to people, when not to talk to people, when the emotions would calm down. And I think growing up in that environment, it's very much like growing up with a teacher. You've seen this game or this show times before, and you know how it's going to get, where it's going to get to. It's just a matter of using it there so the kid or the player can learn from it. So it gave me a good sense of an understanding of development and teaching. So I was able to apply it a little bit to my game, but also to apply it in helping others.
Yeah, we were talking about this yesterday with a football coach in Connecticut who was dismissed because he was making a kid run. You're there with Little League, with the Cal Ripken Little League, and just can you discipline nowadays?
Well, the definition of discipline is interesting to me because when people say old school, it almost refers to run as a penalty, or do calisthenics as a penalty, or do push-ups because you did something wrong. I witnessed my dad, and he's as old school as anything. He never believed in that sort of penalty. Now, I had a soccer coach that every time things didn't go well or we lost, we had to run the hill.
Mm-hmm.
And his cadence on his whistle, if he was okay and not too mad, his cadence on his whistle would go beep, beep, which meant the next person in line would go. But if he was mad, it would just beep, 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 beep. And you'd be running up the hill, all the way down the hill, up the hill, until he saw fit for you to stop. Now, looking back on that, it made me mad, but it also made me develop. It made me determined. It made me many other things as a result of that. So I think in some ways there's a value to it, but I don't like the penalties of doing something or associating penalty. Discipline's all right. Being on time's all right. All the things that you need, responsibility to your teammates if you're not acting right to them. The penalty is you're not playing. The penalty is you don't get to do what you want to do. So I think that's the greater penalty.
Yeah, I agree. Playing time, it's one thing to fine, even a major leaguer, I'll fine you. No, if I take away playing time, now it hurts you and hurts your team. By the way, I'll leave you with this. The best average you had against a player with at least 30 at-bats, which pitcher would you say you had the best success against?
Oh, man, I don't know. It used to be Saberhagen and Swindell.
No, there's about 10 guys ahead of those Swindell and Saberhagen.
30 at bats. That's a pretty decent sample size, but it could be, I guess.
It's a Yankee.
It is?
Yeah. And it's a lefty.
I would have never guessed. Who?
Ron Guidry.
Ron Guidry. I think I had a couple of homers off him.
Yeah, you did pretty well. You hit 2 home runs off Guidry.
Yeah, it was the opposite field in New York one time. I remember that one.
You guys don't forget anything. You know that? You probably know what the damn pitch count was.
It was a changeup, 2-1.
And Darling's the one who went to Yale. Look at you, Cal. Look at you.
Well, yeah, I can remember those things, but other things I'm having trouble remembering.
All right, well, just remember, you're doing the Toronto-Cleveland series, and it starts tomorrow night at 7 Eastern on TBS.
So, Dan,
yes.
you helped me with my my tie and all that kind of stuff in the studio years ago.
Yeah.
So now they got me as an experiment. Well, it's not going to be an experiment because we're going to do it, but I'm down next to the dugouts. So I have 2 stations set up with monitors and headsets.
Yeah.
And I'm performing with the broadcast crew, with Ronnie and Ernie by headset, but I'm in a different location. I think it's really interesting because you get to see the game from there, from that vantage point. You don't really get to see the game from the broadcast booth. So any advice for me to integrate, what would you look for from the side? I'm not a sideline reporter. I'm just giving you a perspective from the sideline.
I would view it like you did as a player. What are you noticing as a player? Whether you're in the field or at the plate, you're going to notice subtle things that what is said, somebody's doing this, it feels like this. If you can translate that as what you did as a player to help you be successful, then do that as a broadcaster.
Because I watch those things now. You're looking at the manager mouthing something to the hitter. You're looking at defenses. You're looking about early things. And the hard part about doing that is trying to interject into the dead space of the broadcast, because you got those two. When you're 3 up in a booth, you almost can do hand signals and tap somebody, and there's sort of a rhythm you get into. But when you're down there, sometimes I have to save those things for another situation. But that's how I see the game, though. So I'm not watching the monitors nearly as much as I did up in the booth.
Yeah, and I think that's the way to go about it. Have fun. Tell Ernie and Ron we said hello. And we'll be watching tomorrow night.
Okay, Dan.
Thanks,
you.
buddy. That's Cal Ripken Jr.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.